members and those who are connected. Let me actually just check on the procedural part that we actually just check who's connected. Secretariat, if you can actually help us with that so
Chair,
that we can proceed.
Okay, Chair, I will call out the names of the members that I have on the list. Ms. Yaku, Chair.
Yes, Honorable Yaku. She is connected.
She is connected, Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Cuthbert, Chair.
Honorable
Sorry,
Cuthbert.
Chair, I was struggling with my connection. I am connected. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Honorable Yaku. Okay.
Mr. Cuthbert, Chair.
Honorable Cuthbert.
Good morning, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Chair, Mr. McPherson is on the platform. His mic is just giving some problems at the moment. He is on the platform. Mr. Mbuyane, Chair.
Honorable Mbuyane.
Honorable Chairperson, good morning and good morning to the colleagues.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome.
Chair, Mr. Burns Namashe, Chair.
Honorable Namashe.
Morning, Chair, and morning, colleagues.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome.
Chair, Mrs. Hermans, Chair.
Honorable Hems.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning to everyone on the platform.
Thank you. Welcome.
Chair, Mr. Mulder, Chair.
Honorable Mulder.
Good morning, Chair, Honorable Minister, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mulder. Welcome.
Chair, Mr. Tring, Chair.
Honorable Tring.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Chair, Ms. Muatse, Chair.
Honorable Muatse. Honorable Muatse.
She's on the platform, Chair. Maybe she's just having struggles.
Okay. All right.
And Chair, I'm assuming we will assist Ms. Mutahung. She's maybe having trouble linking on, Chair, but we will assist her getting onto the platform, Chair.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Then can we just check the agenda, Secretariat, for our meeting today? Honorable members, I can see that, the issue will be then having welcomed members will be the apologies. If we can just check from you, Secretariat, the apologies before we look at the adoption.
At the moment, we have no apologies. I'm assuming we're assisting Ms. Mutahung to get onto the platform, Chair, but otherwise there is no apologies, Chair.
Okay. We actually do have the item. Yes.
I'm also present. I'm struggling. The network is moving.
Oh, thank you very much, Honorable Mwatse. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Welcome. Okay. Secretariat, we can see the agenda, and maybe allow me to actually, honorable members, put before you the agenda item. I think on my part, one thought there should be just an update of where the process is on the NLC process in terms of the chairperson. But also there's also a briefing on the appointment of the acting chair, which is actually being raised by the minister. I'm sure he will be able to speak to that. So if ever, maybe we can just check on those two agenda items. And one would really want to appreciate that members were able to respond positively in the request that the minister wanted to actually brief the committee. And obviously, I think we will actually have discussions moving on the item to be able to actually agree on the way forward. Are there any issues, members? Yes, sir.
So we have Mr. Mbuyane and Mrs. Hermans, Chair.
Honorable Mbuyane.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Chair. I was checking the the similarity of the two questions.
The line is bad, Honorable Mbuyane. Your line is very bad.
Two items to be discussed. I propose that we adopt it.
Okay. Sorry, Honorable Mbuyane, your line is terrible, but I can hear that you
moving to adopt it moving
as it is. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Hammonds.
Yes, Chair, in seconding the adoption of the agenda, I don't know, in your presentation of the agenda, you are adding an additional matter.
Yeah.
Come again.
You are adding the additional matter on the appointment of the chairperson, which is not on the agenda for today. So I want to adopt the agenda as it is, which is just the briefing by the minister regarding the appointment of an acting chairperson for the board of the NLC. The permanent appointment of an NLC chairperson is not on the agenda for today.
Okay. No, I think you're actually quite correct. But I think one wanted just to say the part of giving just the background, when you actually have the agenda adopted, it's just the track of where we are, because the last part we are looking at, honorable members, is the report in terms of the subsequently ATC report by the 12th of March. And actually, it will be the consideration by the House that we are expecting. So there's nothing much, or there's nothing that would be reported on that specific issue. So Secretariat, for item of update of the NLC process, it's a point that the committee process has been concluded. We are looking at the parliamentary process. So I think the connection is the ATC. I think that's the main point one wanted just to raise without actually having to have any discussion on that issue. So I think the item will be the briefing by the minister regarding the appointment of the acting chairperson. So I think we should actually then check if ever there's any objection, but I think maybe we can actually then proceed on the adopted agenda.
Chair, we have Mr. Cuthbert's hand is raised, Chair.
Honorable Cuthbert.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm not sure what the consternation about, discussing the process that has unfolded up until this point, brings to members of the Portfolio Committee. The last time, or the last order paper that we saw towards the end of last term showed that it was first on other matters to be dealt with. So I imagine it would serve before the House as soon as we get back on the 5th of May. And I think it's important that we, acknowledge that and, understand what it is we need to do going forward. So I don't see there being a problem with discussing that matter, to be honest with you.
So I think the suggestion was the item to be a matter for noting, Honorable Cuthbert. And I'm sure it's going to be an issue where when processes actually unfold, the committee will then be briefed fully on the processes moving forward. Okay, so can we then actually proceed? Because I think the part of the briefing by the minister will be actually around the acting chairperson of the NLC. And I think I can actually say I did receive a letter from the minister in response, and on the question of Ms. Dando, who's the NLC Audit and Risk Committee, regarding the legality of the appointment of the acting chairperson. We should actually appreciate that at least the committee is receiving the presentation so that we are properly updated. Obviously, there have been a number of issues that one actually thought would be quite important. That do we as a committee have a role to play in the matter than being appraised. So I think mainly we looking at the briefing of the minister being appraising of the committee on developments. And I think obviously there will be actually issues relating to advice, or when we get involved on that issue as a committee in the separation of power issue, check if ever that actually affects any of those issues. And given the act, does the committee have a role to in the appointment of an acting chairperson? I think it's an issue that on our part as a committee, we are just getting information, or we are informed. I'm sure we will be able to then, in the request of the minister, to be able to brief us, be able to get him to talk to us about the issue before us, which is actually around the acting chairperson. And on my part, I actually did receive correspondence from the chairperson of the committee of the NLC, raising issues of concern. And I'm sure the minister as well have issues that will be clarified, but obviously we do have the commission and the minister having to actually assist us to take the process forward. So can I just firstly check if I can actually then be able to invite the minister to be able to talk to us on that matter? Honorable Minister.
Good morning. Good morning, Honorable Chairperson. Good morning to the honorable members of the committee, also to the deputy ministers who are present today. Good morning to the staff of the portfolio committee, the support staff of the committee, as well as officials of the department and other persons who are present today. Chairperson, may I start by thanking you for accepting my request that I directed to you for an opportunity to brief the portfolio committee on matters relating to the appointment of an acting chairperson. I do recognize that Parliament is currently in a recess period where members of Parliament have significant constituency work obligations, and that you have kindly agreed to pause that work this morning so that the meeting can take place. And as the executive is accountable to Parliament, I believe it's appropriate that I provide the committee today with an account of what has transpired, and I want to appreciate, therefore, this opportunity. Chairperson, the purpose of this session from my side, from my request side, is to brief the committee on the appointment of an acting chairperson, and to consult with the committee and to seek the committee's input and recommendations on the appointment of the acting chairperson. In view of the earlier comment that was made, Chairperson, I want to clarify upfront that I will not seek today to address any of the matters relating to the appointment of the permanent chairperson, nor to address any of the substantive matters relating to the forensic probe and the SIU investigation into the NLC. This is really just about a discussion on the acting chairperson from my request side. And with your indulgence, Chairperson, I want to cover three areas. The first is the context of the appointment of an acting chairperson in November last year, and the extension of the term in January this year. Secondly, to cover the governance questions that I've considered and the concerns that I've had to take into account. And third, to say, given the delay we are facing currently with finalizing a permanent chairperson, what advice and recommendations the portfolio committee may have to deal with the situation pending the finalization of a nominee or of a recommendation by the committee and then a nominee by the executive authority. So the first issue, Chair and honourable members, is the context to the appointment of an acting chairperson in November and in January. And I thought I would briefly take the committee through that, because some of the discussion later, or the issues that I would like to raise later, could helpfully benefit from just contextualizing the appointment. Honourable members may recall that on the 12th of November last year, I submitted to the Speaker of the National Assembly the names of 3 candidates, along with their CVs, for consideration by the Portfolio Committee, so that the committee may provide me with recommendations regarding the suitability of candidates for appointment to the position of chairperson of the NLC. For ease, I'm going to refer to that as the permanent chairperson, just to not confuse issues, but of course, that is the chairperson of the NLC. I also included in that letter the full list of persons who were nominated through the public nomination process. Now, at the time, Chair, I had provided 3 names to the committee for reasons that I shared with the committee previously in writing. And they were that it was based first on a precedent that was followed in 2017 by the Portfolio Committee and the then Minister of Trade and Industry. During that process, when an appointment for chairperson to the NLC was due to be made, my predecessor as minister provided the Portfolio Committee initially with 1 name as the proposed candidate from the list of nominees. And following a request from the Portfolio Committee for a wider pool, he submitted 3 names from those nominated for the position. And this was agreed between the minister and the committee. The committee considered the 3 names and made recommendations. So it was one area that I was briefed on by my officials as the process that previously applied. Then also Section 3(3) of the Act provides for the process to appoint a chairperson of the board, which sets out a dual role, a role for the minister as the appointing agent and the Portfolio Committee, who is required to make recommendations to the minister prior to an appointment being made. I am advised, and I was advised at the time, that there are different legal interpretations on the role of the Portfolio Committee in the process. However, and this is really an important area for me to emphasize, because the Portfolio Committee requested to be furnished with a full list and the CVs, and also in deference to the parliamentary legal opinion that the committee had obtained at the time, I readily complied with the request of the committee and submitted all the CVs for the individuals who were nominated through the public call for nominations. I requested the Portfolio Committee, in line with Section 3(3) of the Act, to make recommendations to me regarding the suitability of persons for appointment as chairperson of the NLC by the 30th November last year, to enable the appointment to be made. And the importance of 30 November was that that was the expiry of the term of office of the previous chairperson. The committee initially developed a work plan that I was advised was based on the 30 November timeframe, which, had it been possible for that time frame to be met, would not have required an acting chairperson to be appointed. But the committee, based on the advice it had received from Parliament's legal advisors, as well as advice that individual members of the committee had obtained, and the opinion and thoughts of committee members, then developed a different process, that I supported, but it was a decision that resulted in the dates being revised. And the committee had considered at the time that it may require a period of 3 months. Given, of course, now the imminent expiry of the term of office of the previous chairperson, I took into account a number of factors, and I appointed an acting chairperson on the 30th November last year, and appointed her for a period up to the end of January this year. And I subsequently extended her period to the end of March. And I want to shortly detail the considerations that I took into account in doing so. So that's just by way of the brief background on the circumstances in November last year that required us to address this issue. Now, the second area that I would like to brief the committee on is what are the questions that arise and that I needed to address from a governance point of view. So following the decision I took on the appointment of an acting chairperson, I've also been requested to clarify the basis for the decision. Why did I go the route that I did? And I've sought to address concerns also raised by 4 members of the NLC board. The governance questions that arise, the first one is, do we need to have a chairperson for the board? Is this not something that the board could wait and not have an acting chairperson? The second question is, can the board itself appoint an acting chairperson? Is this something that the minister can effectively accept is a responsibility of the board? The third question is, can the minister as the executive authority appoint an acting chairperson? So is this a responsibility that lies with the executive authority? And if so, on what basis is that concluded? And then the question is, if the minister is empowered to do so, what were the considerations that applied in the appointment of Ms. Zandi Brown as the acting chairperson? And finally, what are the implications from a Public Finance Management Act, PFMA, point? So those are some of the questions that inevitably arise in a situation like this. Honourable members, the Lotteries Act, like many other statutes, does not deal expressly with the issue of how or by whom a member can be appointed to act as an interim chairperson. However, after a careful consideration of the statute and following legal advice on the matter, I am of the view that the executive authority has the implied power to appoint one of the members of the board to perform the functions of the chairperson for the period until a new chairperson can be appointed in terms of Section 3(1)(a). It is an established doctrine of South African law that legislation must be interpreted to include those powers that are reasonably necessary for its operation. These powers are generally referred to as either auxiliary powers or implied powers. And this has to be done on a regular basis, because obviously statute don't deal with all of the issues, but that it sets out very clearly the legal framework. The courts have warned against reading these powers into statute unless it is necessary for the operation of the Act and not merely a matter of convenience. So if there's an absence, an executive authority doesn't have a wide hand or an open hand to just read anything into it. They have to apply the test whether it's necessary. I am satisfied that an appointment of an acting chairperson is necessary for the operation of the Act. And I draw attention to the fact that the Act specifically says there shall be a chairperson. It's not something where there is discretion. And because I was satisfied that the appointment is necessary, I accordingly have the implied power to make that appointment. I say this, honourable members, because the Act specifically requires that a board be in place and that a chairperson be in place. Section 3(1) of the Lotteries Act does not grant the minister a discretion on whether or not to appoint the members of the board. Rather, it states that the minister shall do so. Section 3.1 equally does not permit any flexibility in regard to the composition of the board. Instead, it insists that the board shall include a chairperson, and it makes no provision for exceptions. The function of the chairperson is set out in Section 4 of the Act. They include, for example, determining dates of meetings after consultation with the board, determining proceedings at meetings of the board, notifying the minister of meetings of the board or its executive committee, approving absence of members from meetings, advising the minister if the failure of a member to attend meetings justifies removal. Those are the kind of areas in the statute. Of course, in the, as I'm sure members would be aware, given the documentation that's submitted to Parliament, there's also a range of other responsibilities that chairpersons of boards carry out. It is clear from both the Act and the board charter, and I'm going to come back to the board charter in a moment, that the chairperson performs functions beyond simply chairing a meeting or presiding at meetings of the board. It is necessary for the effective functioning of the board and the Act's regulatory framework that one of the members of the board exercises the functions of the chairperson on an ongoing basis until such time as a new chairperson is appointed in accordance with Section 3.1a. Accordingly, in keeping with the prevailing jurisprudence, the Act must be interpreted as containing an implied power permitting the minister to ensure that a member of the board assumes the function of chairperson in these circumstances that we have. The question may be asked whether I can rely on the board charter to conclude that members of the board can elect one of their members to act as chairperson on an ad hoc basis for each meeting of the board. So let me first consider the status of the board charter. The charter is a document adopted by the board itself to regulate its governance. It does not alter the Lotteries Act and is not relevant to the interpretation of the Act. It's a document that sits outside the Act itself. It's not a regulation that flows from the Act. The current copy of the board charter that I was able to consult is dated 12 March 2020, and the document is signed and the approver is noted as the then board chairperson, Mr. Nevutando. The document describes the board charter as a document that is approved by the board itself. And as I've indicated, it's not binding in law. It cannot supersede the provisions of the Act, and those things need to be taken into account. Nevertheless, I mean, I've said that I've made these points, but even taking that into account, even the content of the board charter itself does not provide for the board to elect an acting chairperson until a permanent chairperson is appointed. So even saying, I don't think the board charter is the relevant document here, but nonetheless, let's look at the document. Clause 8.2.4 of the board charter provides that, and I quote, if the chairperson of the board is absent from a meeting, the members present must elect one of the members present to act as a chairperson, end of quote. So I've considered the implications of this provision. Aside from the status of the board charter in a matter like this that I've spoken to, it is abundantly clear that this clause that I've just quoted now does not apply to the current situation. It applies only where there is a serving chairperson, because it says if the chairperson of the board is absent from a meeting. So it only applies where there's a serving chairperson who's been appointed in terms of the Act, and that person is unable to attend a particular meeting. It says specifically, I quote, if the chairperson of the board is absent from a meeting, unquote, which is not the same as the situation where there is no permanent duly appointed chairperson. It has no application, therefore, in my view, acting on advice, to the current situation in which the position of chairperson is vacant. And it does not confer power to someone to act between meetings, as is clearly required from a chairperson by Section 4 of the Act. Tellingly, the board charter itself lists 17 functions of the board chairperson, most of which go beyond the duties that can be carried out by someone who is simply appointed to act as a chairperson in a particular meeting. So the board charter, even if it was applicable in a matter of this nature, which we say is not, even if it was applicable, does not provide a foundation for concluding that board members may appoint one of their members on an ad hoc basis in these circumstances. I've taken into account that the wording of clause 8.2.4 of the board charter, insofar as it does not deal with the matter of the board being without a chairperson, in fact, supports the interpretation of the Act that I have adopted. By necessary implication, the minister is able to appoint one of the members of the board to perform the functions of chairperson when there is a vacancy until such time as the vacancy can be filled. Now, those were some of the things I've taken into account. I've also taken into account the content of the discussion at the Portfolio Committee meeting held on 24 November last year, at which the matter of an acting chairperson was considered in view of the anticipated delay in the process. The minute the committee considered a new process, the committee recognized that process would take it beyond the end of November. Different options were discussed at the Portfolio Committee. They range from extending the term of the previous chairperson, that was one of the suggestions or proposals made, to the minister appointing a chairperson, and a number of recommendations were made by members of the Portfolio Committee. Looking at the meeting summary, for example, I'd like to quote, and I quote, and it quotes the late Honorable Mantash as proposing that the minister appoint an acting chairperson for the board because the committee could not leave the NLC in a vacuum, unquote. I quote also that Mr. Cuthbert proposed that an independent acting chairperson be put in place until a new chairperson was selected by the minister on the recommendations of this committee. There were other views that favored an extension, as I said, of the term of the previous chairperson, while other members vehemently opposed that proposal. I've also taken into account, honourable members, that Ms. Zandi Brown was designated by the previous minister as a member in terms of Section 31B of the Act, and I am advised by our legal advisors that does not affect her ability to perform the functions of the chairperson on an interim basis. I've also taken into account all relevant factors in deciding to appoint an existing board member as an acting chairperson, rather than someone not drawn from the current members of the board. Following advice from legal advisors, I reached the conclusion that the appointment of someone from outside the board, while perhaps warranted, may require more detailed processes of consultation. And honourable members will recall that the time pressures in late November, at the time when the decision needed to be made, did not permit for those processes to be carried out. As circumstances required that I make the decision on an expedited basis at the end of November, I thought it prudent, after I had made the decision, to provide the board with an opportunity to comment on my decision, and I therefore limited the period of appointment to 2 months to enable consideration of the views of any member of the board, and in anticipation of what was then proposed to be a portfolio committee that was going to be scheduled for January this year. I did receive comments from the board, and following discussion with the department's legal advisors, I concluded that the representations made by the board did not warrant that I not extend Ms. Brown's term for a further 2 months. The board's response, as I've explained to the committee, was to suggest a mechanism that has no basis in law, namely that the board itself must make an appointment from meeting to meeting. I have sought advice on the concerns that the appointment of an acting chairperson may be regarded as irregular and therefore could have audit consequences for the institution. That's one of the matters that have come up. I have been advised by the lawyers that the department contracted that there is no basis in law for the Office of the Auditor General to make an adverse finding in respect of irregular expenditure consequent on my decision to appoint Ms. Brown to serve as an acting chairperson. So they've said they don't believe that the Auditor General can find that the board itself ought to have made that decision. But even given that it's my view based on legal advice, that an adverse finding cannot be made that the board should have made the appointment, I then asked the lawyers, is there anything I can do that can be helpful in allaying the board's concerns about incurring irregular expenditure? And I have now decided to write to the Minister of Finance and the Director General of National Treasury to inform them about my decision to appoint Ms. Brown as the acting chairperson of the board, indicating the rationale and the legal basis for that decision. If the appointment is correct, then issues of irregular payment do not arise. And as I've said, the lawyers have said to me very clearly that there's no basis in law for the contention that the board should appoint an acting chairperson, and so they don't believe that could be a ground for finding irregularity. But because one can never anticipate every possibility, I mean, anything in life is possible. I thought it's worth noting to the committee that even in circumstances where it was found that the appointment was deficient, even if that should be the case, then there is a procedure in the Public Finance Management Act to address this, namely condonation by National Treasury, because the appointment itself does not result in any loss to the institution. It's not as if it's one of those decisions that prefers this service provider over that service provider with a loss of money, taxpayers' money from the fiscus. So what I've really done is to take the committee through the kind of governance considerations that I needed to take into account, both at the time in November and subsequently in the engagement and decision to extend the term of Ms. Brown. Finally, Chairperson, I wanted to turn to the current situation. The committee interviewed candidates for the position as chairperson over the last number of weeks during the March period and adopted a report containing its recommendations. Given the delay caused by the fact that the committee's report has not been considered and adopted by the National Assembly, which is a matter outside the hands of the Portfolio Committee and the Ministry, I will need to address the reality that the acting appointment of Ms. Zandi Brown expires today. And of course, this is not a matter that I had anticipated. By later today, I will need to make an appointment. And I can make that through a number of ways. It could be by extending the period of the current acting chairperson. That's one option that's available. Or through appointing another board member as an acting chairperson. That's another option available. Or by appointing someone from outside the NLC to serve as an acting chairperson, pending the recommendations that would come via Parliament, me applying my mind to those recommendations, making decisions, and appointing a chairperson. Now, I wanted to share with the committee, given that the acting period is longer, as I say, than anticipated, in the circumstances, I would appreciate the comments and the recommendations of the Portfolio Committee on this matter. During the course of today's meeting, it would be enormously important and helpful to me in considering the way forward. So I would seek your thoughts and your comments. And as I've indicated, the options, of course, are an extension of the existing period for the acting chairperson, the appointment of a member from the current board.
Andre, we can't hear the minister. He's gone mute.
I'm sorry, Honourable Cuthbert, is that any better?
We can hear you, Minister. It must be Honourable Cuthbert.
Yeah, I can hear as well. Problem must be on Honourable Cuthbert's side.
Okay.
But I can hear you, so it's very strange.
Okay. I hope the audio improves, Honourable Cuthbert. It's the challenges that we're all having to deal with the new technologies. So just in summary, Chairperson, the options that obviously appear to me to be available would be a extension of the acting period of the current acting chairperson for a further short period to enable the parliamentary process to be completed and for me to apply my mind to the outcome of the parliamentary process, or the appointment of one or other member of the NLC board in these circumstances, or for me to consider the appointment of an acting chairperson for the board from someone who is outside the NLC. Chairperson, I hope I've been able to do justice to the issues. I've not taken the committee through all the minutiae of all the matters, but I was hoping that I would do it with sufficient detail that the committee would have a full understanding of the matters. I want to emphasize that I have not today come here to deal with the broader investigation that is being undertaken on the affairs of the NLC in respect of certain transactions, because the committee is aware of it, it's ongoing, and it's one of the reasons, obviously, for my decision. I want to point out that the 4 board members that have written to me have escalated from simply noting opposition to refusing to participate. And it would be very helpful, I think, to remove any uncertainty by getting greater clarity of any thoughts that the Portfolio Committee may have. I hope, Chairperson, that as soon as we have the process completed for a permanent chairperson, that the NLC would be able to have this governance issue fully resolved, and that we're all working to ensure that, in fact, the NLC is able to serve the people of South Africa in terms of the Act and within the framework of our Constitution. Thank you very much, Chairperson. May I hand back to you?
Okay. No, thank you, Minister. And I think maybe what we may have to look at, when one was actually getting correspondence, responding to yourself, and actually acceding to a meeting today, there were a few questions that have come up, including the question of, does the committee have any role to play on this matter other than being appraised on it? So on my part, I think the part that the committee has been appraised, but obviously the committee must maintain oversight over the implementation of the legislation, but also the committee should provide assurance to the public that government is following the law. So that's what we're doing right now. But there's also another question, Minister. If the expectation of the committee should advise or make recommendation, does this approach not blur the principles of separation of power? I think we'll note that. And we could try to get a sense of this from parties affected. Obviously, we have the NLC and the minister, to let both parties explain why they can or cannot, what cannot be done. So which means there's a point of cooperation one would like to recommend or would encourage of the NLC and the minister finding solution on that matter. And then maybe the final point, Minister, is given the act, does the committee have a role of the appointment of the acting chair? Obviously, we don't actually have a role as the committee. And I think we're looking at the finalization of the chairperson position to actually make sure that it's necessary for us to actually have the process of the appointment of the permanent chair of the NLC as a priority issue. So I will actually invite members of the committee to actually respond to or ask questions for clarity or comment on the points you have raised, Minister, to the meeting. Honorable members.
Chair, we have Mr. Cuthbert followed by Mr. McPherson at the moment, Chair.
Okay. Honorable Cuthbert.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to leave my video off because it seems that my signal is a little bit spotty this morning.
Okay.
Minister, thank you for the information that you've provided. I understand that you have said you don't want to discuss the Hawks and SIU investigation, but I do believe that there must be time made for us to discuss that and what the ongoing process is relating to that matter. It's important that we are kept abreast of the investigations and what actions have been taken thus far. And I think that, you know, to remain silent for 6 months creates uncertainty in the public, and it also doesn't elicit much faith from us as portfolio committee members by virtue of the fact that you're not willing to deal with it head on. However, related to the matter that you've discussed today, it was clear that we could not continue with Professor Alfred Nevutanda at the helm. Under his helm, the NLC had been looted unabated for over 10 years. There were continuous exposés of corruption. There was a failure by him to ensure that the NLC fulfilled its function as necessary, and it was clear that he could not have his term extended, and I think we agree on that principle. At the time, as you stated, we were in favor of the appointment of an independent chairperson, considering the fact that despite Ms. Brown being your minister's representative, she had not spoken out against the activities that had taken place in terms of looting at the Lotteries Commission. And that was our opposition to her appointment at the time. We believe that an independent person with no vested interest in the NLC would have been able to allow for a smooth transition up until a permanent chairperson was appointed. As members of the DA on the Portfolio Committee, we strongly argued in favor of expediting this process late last year. But ANC members of the Portfolio Committee were not interested in working into the December period in order to ensure that we were able to finalize this process and restore some semblance of credibility to the NLC. We strongly urged them at the time, but we were rebuffed and told that we were not, that we were not handling this process in the correct manner. Now, Chair, I would like to ask the Minister What action is he going to take against those 4 NLC board members who have not only launched a fight back campaign against him in the media through strategic leaks, but have also threatened legal action against the minister and have constantly sought to undermine him, even though he has given them sufficient rope? We have long called for the NLC to be placed under administration and for the board to be sacked, considering the fact that they all failed to act while looting continued unabated at the NLC. Chair, is the minister willing to name those 4 individuals on the NLC board who have sought to challenge the process that has been followed? I think on the legal basis that the minister has argued here today, and the consultative process in which he's opened up for portfolio committee members to put forward their submission on how we should proceed going forward, we would like to strongly argue in favour of the appointment of an external, independent acting chairperson until the permanent chairperson is appointed. If we look at the SABS matter, where that organisation was placed under administration, as far as I understand, there was an independent person outside of the SABS that was put in place. It was Mr. Strachan at the time, if I'm correct in saying. And I think that it's, you know, a possible option for us to pursue, that we put somebody else in place that is external to the board, because I've got a feeling that if the current board members who have sought to challenge this process continue in the way in which they have, we are going to see a lot, you know, an ensuing fight and, you know, an ensuing case of problems at the NLC, and that we cannot deal with. Also, what I would like to find out, and I think that we should possibly get a parliamentary legal opinion on this, is if there is a way for us to sit as a special sitting of the House where we'll be able to consider the appointment, or rather the committee report that needs to be submitted to the minister by the House, so that we can get a permanent chairperson put in place, and that we can allow the institution to start healing and for it to start restoring its credibility amongst the public. And I think that that's also an avenue that we need to investigate. And I would just like to urge other committee members to think in the public interest this morning, and to make sure that what we do is right for the organisation and right for the most vulnerable in our society, who require the NLC's funding in order to make sure that they uplift themselves out of poverty, and that they are able to continue, you know, the good work that they are doing, despite the fact that we are in the midst of a very serious health pandemic. Thank you, Chairperson.
Chair, Mr. Cuthbert, Mr. McPherson, Chair, followed by Mr. Mbuyane and Mr. Burns Namasha, Chair.
Honourable McPherson.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone, again. Just the first thing, Minister, I mean, the big question is, I mean, is this not a meeting or a briefing or whatever you want to call it that is, you know, 4 months too late? This meeting really should have taken place towards the end of November, when we knew that Mr. Nevertender was on his way out. We knew that there was going to be an extreme delay in the appointment of a acting chairperson, and yet here we are 4 months later, still talking about it. I mean, this is a crisis of the NLC governance that was entirely predictable, that was warned about, and is of the making, in fact, of this own committee, because they refused to do the work that was required, which we had begged and pleaded of our colleagues to do in December. They refused. They said, no, they rather want to enjoy their beach holidays than actually get on with the work and do what was required. So this is not surprising. This was predictable. This was warned of. And here we are trying to unscramble an egg now. And we are chasing ourselves, trying to find a solution. And really, you know, I don't know how many more years it's going to take for government ministers and members of the governing party to start listening to rational voices on the opposition benches, because this is a crisis, quite frankly, of your guys' making. And now we are trying to be consulted on the day of the minister wanting to make a decision to try and give some veil of credibility to that process. I think it's in poor form, it's in poor taste, and is really, really problematic. When the minister speaks about governance and wanting to ensure that governance is upheld, I agree with him. We have wanted to uphold governance from day one, but it's not even a low-grade civil war that is taking place between the minister and the NLC. It is a full-scale nuclear war that is unfolding between the minister and the NLC, and that's for very obvious reason, because there is entrenched patronage and access to millions of rands that is at play here. And for as long as the slow play, the long game continues to take place, the nuclear war will increase to thermonuclear war, and we're going to have a cataclysmic outcome because there is so much at stake. And for the longest period of time, bordering on certainly over a year and maybe closer to 18 months, it has baffled me as to why the minister has allowed the situation to continue, and a board that is so hostile to good governance, well, in fact, that is actually the antithesis of good governance, has been allowed to continue for so long, to the point that even the acting chairperson, whether they are or aren't, is up for debate, refuses to answer parliamentary questions because they want to hide behind an SIU report. And Minister, I will give you credit, and I did do that publicly, to say thank you for at least intervening in that particular point, that they just refuse to answer parliamentary questions and want to hide behind SIU reports, because I can't even get an answer as to why Carol Bauer was given 7 million rand, and no one seems to have that answer. So, colleagues, I don't want us to be, quite frankly, blaming this person and that person. This is of this committee's making. The situation is of the minister's making. And how we climb out of this is quite frankly beyond me. I think that the Honourable Cuthbert makes a very good recommendation that this committee should be imploring the Speaker to converge an urgent meeting of the House to at least adopt and approve the report of this committee, so then the minister has a way forward with 3 names, and we can even stop with this acting on and off nonsense. We can just get the NLC to get on with its job, restoring governance, clearing out the deep-seated corruption. And if no one wants to admit that, they're living in a parallel universe. But we've got to stop this paralysis that takes place. So I look forward to the minister's answers to those questions and response to those comments. Thank you very much.
The other name was Mboyane.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. I think I'm audible enough. Chair, my assessment, I think there is a serious challenge there between the department and the entity. One, what I pick up here is that the communication and the engagement of the minister and the entity or the board is worrying, because they are communicating through letters and so forth. And it shows that there are serious challenges between the department and the entity. Then one, I think also the committee need to uphold the constitution. The committee must also exercise their role in terms of oversight in making sure that the entity and the department execute their mandate. Chairperson, also, I would like to propose that the minister convene frequent meetings with the NLC board so that they try to solve any challenges that are there between the entity and the department. And also on the discussion, I think my recommendation will be to extend the the extension of the acting board until the appointment of a chairperson, a board chair. I think that will be my proposal. Thank you.
Secretariat, the further hands.
Mr. Burns Ngamashe, Mr. Thring, and Mrs. Hermans, Chair.
Burns Ngamashe.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think, Chair, the key question here is whether or not the minister is empowered to appoint a person to be an acting chairperson. And I think, Chair, in my view, the minister is empowered to do that. Precisely because the NLC chairperson is classified as a public entity in terms of Section 48 of the PFMA, which designates it as an accounting authority in terms of Section 49, with fiduciary responsibilities conferred to it in terms of Section 50. So when we talk of the position of the chairperson of a public entity, in this case, the NLC, whether it is a permanent position or an acting position, it is a position not with a peripheral function of just chairing a meeting, but it is that function which is expected to execute fiduciary responsibilities as envisaged in terms of Section 50 of the PFMA. And the minister, in terms of, as an executive authority, in terms of Section 63, the minister has a responsibility conferred to him, in this case, to ensure that the public entity complies with this act and any financial policy of that execution of that executive, and therefore it must be clear even to the board members and the entity itself that here they have to act in a manner that is consistent with the provisions of the PFMA, which is a statutory instrument governing their functionality. And I think the other matters, Chair, that would relate to investigations as it would relate to criminal matters and or allegations of corruption. Chair, let us allow the criminal justice system and the institutions to actually deal with all those allegations of impropriety. For purposes of this meeting, it is for the committee to make a determination whether the minister has that power. The least that we could do as a committee, if the legislation has constraints, as you can see, Section 3 of the principal legislation. Perhaps if you look at it in line with the provisions of subsection, I think it's subsection 6. If I look at the legislation properly, the least that we could do is just to the matter to be considered by the committee for purposes of concurrence. And if we are looking at it for purposes of concurrence, it would seem, Chair, that members of the committee who have already spoken, we are of the view that the minister does have the power to appoint the acting chairperson. The merits and demerits of the character of the individual and or person, that should be left to the discretion of the minister. And I have every confidence that the minister would have adequate instruments to use so as to vet the propriety of any person who could be appointed to act in this position. And as I learned, Chairperson, my sense is that as the committee, we have done what is expected of us, at the risk of actually finding ourselves at a space of overreach. Let's rather allow the minister to exercise the statutory function of appointing the acting chairperson until such time that the parliamentary processes unfold to a point where a permanent chairperson is appointed. Thank you very much, Chair.
Honorable Tring.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Chair, I think that as a committee, we have done our work in terms of the process of the shortlisting for the position of the chair of the NLC. Obviously, there are challenges at NLC that needs to be dealt with. And we want to encourage the minister that every allegation, any allegation that has been leveled against members of board members of the NLC must be dealt with, so that we have an NLC that is credible, an NLC that is transparent, and an NLC that has the respect not only of yourself, the committee, but also of the members of citizens of the Republic of South Africa. That being said, Chair, I think that we need to be able to find a way forward. And there is a situation where today there is the expiry date of the acting chair that the minister has appointed. So in my sense, we either have a situation where we extend that particular period of the acting chair, or we look at the DA's recommendation of appointing an external person. Preferably, I think from the position of the ACDP, we would have also preferred an external chair to be acting chair to be appointed. But I think under the conditions that we are currently in, the only viable solution that I can see is that the position of the current acting chair be extended, and hopefully the period for the appointment of the chairperson of the NLC is not going to be extended unduly. Hopefully there will not be also challenges to the appointment of the legal challenges to the appointment of the chairperson of the NLC. So the position of the ACDP is similar to my other colleagues from the ANC, is that we allow for the based also on the information and the legal advice that the minister has actually given to us, that the minister goes ahead, extends the position of the acting chair until such time that the chairperson of the NLC is appointed, the full-time chairperson of the NLC is appointed. And again, Chair, I think that we have to deal with any discrepancies in terms of allegations of misappropriation of funds, must be dealt with all of the different arms of the crime-fighting arms that we currently have. Chair, I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Honorable Hermans.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and once again, greetings to everyone on the platform. I see quite a few faces that I don't know, but welcome to our meeting. Thank you, Chair. We appreciate the Minister that you acceded to the request from the Chair to come and brief the committee of the PC on the matter of the acting NLC Chair. And we know that you have been clear when you did your introductory remarks that you are not going to discuss the SIU and the forensic investigations. And we are glad that those are happening. And we are saying that we must give them the space to conclude their work, and that everybody who is involved in wrongdoing at the NLC must meet the full might of the law. I'm of the view, Chairperson, that you have applied your mind and that you have a legal opinion that in terms of appointing of the acting, in order to make sure that there is an acting chair at the NLC. So I want to second the ANC who spoke before me, ANC members, and also the ACDP, in saying that the only logical thing that can be done right now is to extend the appointment of the existing acting chair. And because I'm of the view that with the report having been ATC'd already, the committee, the PC report, that we will soon have a chairperson, a duly appointed chairperson of the NLC, and that we look forward to the matters at NLC to be attended to, and that we have a fully functional organization that will uplift the poorest of the poor in the country through implementing their mandate. Thank you very much, Chair.
I think we may have to check. Are there any further hands, Secretariat? If not, I think, yeah, Minister, I think on our part, we will actually say it will be important for the parliamentary legal side as well to be able to consider that, because on my part, I think it's quite important when we decide on this issue to ensure that at least we don't actually present an approach that undermines the processes that we should actually be able to engage on. Minister, can I ask you to actually come back and maybe on the comments received from members? Your comment, Minister?
Thank you, Chairperson. And let me first start by really appreciating what I think has been an enormously helpful set of comments by all the members, and I say this without any exception. So perhaps to start with the specific comments, and then just to try to lift out one or two of the broader issues that I think has come up. So the first speaker was Honourable Cuthbert, and I wanted to appreciate the comments, Honourable Cuthbert, that you've made about the importance of concluding the work of the law enforcement agencies. It's a theme that has also been picked up by a number of other members. I think Honourable McPherson raised the matter, Honourable Tring raised the matter, and Honourable Hermans raised the matter. And of course, it would be, it's not within the remit of what I'm able to talk through today, but I do appreciate the legitimate concerns that the members of Parliament has. The challenge, of course, with these things is in the course of an investigation, one has to be circumspect about the release of information in a manner or circumstances where the investigation's integrity could subsequently be challenged. So it is important for us to try to take advice on how to do this so that there are no grounds for anybody who has been involved in wrongdoing to seek to set aside the findings of a forensic investigation on the basis of any procedural defects. And that is a necessary discipline that we as members of the executive must maintain to ensure that at the end of the day, when these investigations are completed, that they have integrity and that the law can take its course, and where wrongdoing is uncovered, that those persons are held to account and brought to book. The Honorable Cuthbert correctly says that he, and I think the DA, favored an independent chairperson, and mentioned this in the course of the meeting that was held in October. Was it October? Yes, October last year, during the course of last year. And I think the honorable member also gave the reasons at the time. I needed to take these things very carefully into account. I had to weigh up the various factors, and there were, of course, substantial arguments in favor of an independent chairperson that is outside of the NLC, and there were arguments in favor of taking someone from the board. And eventually, what played the bigger role was what I was advised would need to be processes I would need to go through in the event of bringing someone in from the outside, given that we only had literally a few days to do so. Honorable Cuthbert asked the question on what action the executive authority is taking or contemplating in respect of the 4 NLC board members. I really would like to say that obviously on a continuous basis, our lawyers are evaluating the functionality of the NLC board, and they will and have advised in the past on the factors that I must take into account. On the naming of individual board members, if Honorable Cuthbert, if you would give me an opportunity to apply my mind to the matter and come back to it. I have not taken advice on this matter, and as I say, I want to be rather an abundance of caution on any matter that may serve as the basis for a review, so that we ensure that all processes have full integrity and that the law can take its course. If allegations that have been made about wrongdoing are substantiated, they involve very, very considerable sums of money with enormous consequences on the poor, and they would need to be followed up very, very vigorously. So the stakes, as they say, are quite high, and I therefore need to just apply my mind. On the issue of SABS having an external person appointed during an administration process, Honorable Cuthbert, you are again right. And should it be the advice that I get based on the facts and the law that I need to go that route, then I will certainly apply my mind to it. On the matter of a special sitting of the National Assembly, that's outside of my remit. Of course, it's a matter I'm sure that the committee may want to consider, but obviously the sooner we get to a conclusion, it's a point also that Honorable McPherson made, the better, I think, for everybody. And when I say a conclusion, I mean the appointment of the permanent chairperson. Honorable Cuthbert finally spoke about the need to restore credibility of the NLC And this, for me, is what's at the heart of ensuring good governance, that the NLC's reputation has taken an enormous battering as a result of very, very serious allegations which, if true, go to the very heart of integrity. And therefore, the South African public is entitled and has the right to demand that we must take such steps as are necessary to restore the credibility of the NLC. And I hope the appointment of a permanent chairperson can be an important step in that process. Honourable McPherson, first, thank you for your comments. I take note of the concern that you've raised, that it would have been better to have had the conversation at the end of November last year. And the one part that you've said, which is that we all agree on the goal of good governance. I think that's heartening and important. You asked the question, why has the executive authority waited so long? And you've pointed to a number of matters of conduct involving the NLC itself, similar to the issues raised by Honourable Cuthbert. And I can only repeat my response there, which is I take advice on the matter. These issues are continuously being considered by legal advisors, taking the facts and the law into account, taking judicial precedent into account, and all options are being considered and continue to be considered on how best to ensure good governance. I recognize the frustration, and I don't wish to in any way undermine the frustration that I see with ensuring that we get to the point of good and appropriate governance. Honourable Mbuyane has made the important point that we need to address the challenges as soon as possible, and Honourable Mbuyane has made a suggestion that we find ways to enhance the engagement between the department, ministry, and the NLC itself, and among others, the Director General is, of course, the department's accounting officer, and is the person who is most familiar with all the accounting rules that I would normally rely on, is also reaching out to meet with the Commissioner. On the proposal, Honourable Mbuyane made the proposal that the current acting chairperson's term of office should be extended for a short additional period to enable the parliamentary process to be concluded. Honourable Burns Nkamashe gave what I thought was a masterclass, an impressive account of governance, of the importance of a chairperson of a public entity, of the prescripts of the Public Finance Management Act. And he makes what I think is a fundamental point. And his fundamental point is that a chairperson is not someone that simply chairs a meeting and appoints persons to speak in sequence. That a chairperson of a public entity has fundamental fiduciary responsibilities on behalf of the board. And in those circumstances, he conclude, in my view, correctly, that this is a decision that the executive authority, in other words, the minister, must take on an acting chairperson. It's not a responsibility that rests with the committee. And for me, that was put so succinctly and clearly that I can do no better than to repeat the core points of Honourable Burns Nkamashe's setting out of the issues. And Honourable Burns Nkamashe concludes by saying that he believes that the portfolio committee should not overreach, and that the minister must carry out that function. And I've taken note of that recommendation too. Honorable Tring, thank you very much for your comments too. Honorable Tring indicated that the committee did its work on shortlisting, and that the committee was certainly Honorable Tring would wish every allegation that has been made must be dealt with in a credible, transparent manner to build an NLC that can be characterized by strong public credibility. These are sentiments that I endorsed. Honorable Tring then recalled what he saw as the practical options available, which is to extend the acting chair's term of office as acting chair, or to appoint an external person as an acting chairperson. And while Honorable Tring says that as a matter of broad approach, he and his party would prefer an external person, in the circumstances, he says, that we face with now, he believes that it would be appropriate to extend the term of office of the current chairperson for a limited period, to enable the processes to be concluded. Honorable Hermans, thank you very much for your comment. And of course, I was most grateful after having written a letter to the chair requesting the meeting that the honorable members made themselves available today. So it is me owing thanks to the honorable members rather than the other way around, and I appreciate that. I also support your request that the forensic investigation be concluded as soon as possible, and that all matters relevant to its mandate be considered. And thank you for the comments that you've made. As regards proposals, Honourable Hermans then indicated her support for the appointment, to extend the appointment of Ms. Zandi Brown for a further period as acting chairperson, and she concluded with the request that we need to get the NLC refocused so that it addresses the needs of the poorest citizens of our democracy. So I think based on that, what's really come out is on the question of the role of the minister. I think there's been consensus that the executive authority, the minister, must make the appointment. Honourable Macpherson asked, I thought, an interesting question, which is, should one not really have looked at it at the time in November? And the concerns that Honourable Macpherson and the response that I think was implicit in the comments of Honourable Burns Kamashe shows the complexity of the issues. That I think it is clear that ultimately it is a decision of the minister. I've taken the view now at the end of this period that it would be important to get a recommendation from the committee. I did take into account, I should say, the discussion that the committee held in the course of its deliberations last year. And I quoted the comments from that meeting of both the late Honourable Montage as well as Honourable Cuthbert, and I indicated there were other views too. So I've taken the views of the committee and the recommendations made by individual committee members into account. And while there was not a single unified view in the committee, different members, of course, had made different recommendations. It is better to do it as it is today, where I am present, and I do recognize that, and I accept that it is a much better process than one of the committee discussing the matter and me being briefed by the parliamentary liaison person. I'm sorry I was not able to come to the meeting last year as a result of the challenges at the time with the diary and our work on the African Continental Free Trade Area. We were rushing to get all the work done in time for the summit, the Heads of State and Government Summit that was scheduled in early December. And that and other diary challenges were just the constraint, not a preference that I had not engaged with the committee. And I think today has really shown the value of that engagement. So out of the discussion, if the minister has the power, the question is, should the minister exercise it just on his own, so that, in the words of Honorable Nkosi, there is no blurring in the separation of power, which is a question Honorable Nkosi asked. And I think because the decision ultimately is a decision of the executive authority, in this case, it would be better, I think, given that we have the opportunity today to have the meeting, to get such recommendations as the committee may wish to make. So in the discussions last year, the committee was not able to make a unified recommendations. It really identified different options, but today it seems that it's come down to two broad recommendations. Number one, that I extend the period of the current acting chairperson for a further period to enable the parliamentary processes to be completed. And of course, the chair would be aware of the number of members who spoke in favor of that. And the second proposal is that I consider an external candidate to serve as acting chairperson. And again, our chairperson here today would be aware of the number of members who had made that proposal. And I now have recommendations that are able to inform the decision. So though the Act does not spell out the role of the Portfolio Committee in this case, given the opportunity to have heard the representations of the committee last year and now today engaging the committee, I think I'm in a much better position to be able to make a decision. So, Chairperson, I hope I've covered the different areas that has been raised, and I think the discussion has given greater clarity. And may I say, I do recognize that just about every member of Parliament who spoke today expressed the desire that we get to a strong, credible NLC that is able to address the needs of the most vulnerable in our society, and that there's an urgency to address governance challenges and to address the allegations that have been made. So I'd like to thank you, Chairperson, for this opportunity to respond. If there are some matters that I've not picked up on, I would be happy, of course, to do so. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Okay, Minister, I think the point one wanted just to raise is just in conclusion that it does actually allow space on your side to actually consult, engage at a point where we have less of correspondence or legal teams or lawyers working in between us, but engaging more directly in finding a solution. Because even on our part today as the committee, with the responsibility we actually have been very open to give you an indication of what our thoughts are without actually saying, Minister, do this, Minister, do that. So I think maybe that's one part where one encourages a more engaging process between yourself and the board, particularly when we actually refer to the communication we have received from maybe the chairperson of the NLC Audit and Risk Committee, which I thought it picks up lots of similar issues that we are looking at. So I think it will be quite important that we have less lawyers in between us so that we don't actually end up in court where we waste a lot of money, where we actually, because that's what will happen if ever we don't actually have proper communication and engagement and find solution. We have given lots of options to you to be able to actually consider. And I'm sure for those affected, which is actually the board, it will be good that at least we are able to ensure that things are done in a way that it creates a stable and developmental space for the NLC. So I think that's the point which one wanted to raise, Minister. Unless maybe there are any other issues, but we want to thank you for the inputs that you have given, because when all of us are thinking there should be actually quite important contribution from the committee side as well. We appreciate that we are discussing, it's not on social media. We are not actually having public discussion. We are in the portfolio committee and we are considering these options and contributions. And I'm sure it will actually empower you or to be able to look at various options, engage and be able to implement. Thank you very much, Minister. And thanks for your time. Honorable members, I'm sure we can actually move to the next item, which is the closure of the meeting. Having received and got responses from the minister, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the chair.
Thank
and
you,
thank
Chair.
you to all the members.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just make one request, please, if you don't mind, to the minister?
Matthias,
It's Cuthbert.
Cuthbert.
Hey, you have closed the meeting. What is this
No,
now?
no, it's not. It's just a matter of housekeeping. It's nothing substantive. It's
Okay.
just to ask that once the minister's applied his mind about the names of the NLC, the NLC board members who have brought a court challenge, if he would just confirm in writing what his decision is to us, please.
Chair, we're waiting for you to respond to that request. It seems as if the chair has left the building.
Chair is still on the platform.
Sorry, I've muted. I've muted myself. No, I thought what I understood is that when there is a decision taken in terms of the chair of the NLC board, there should be actually formal communication to confirm sent to the portfolio committee. I thought maybe that was my understanding of what was suggested. Chair, when the process is concluded. Secretariat?
Chair, that's not, it was on the issues of the 4 NLC members, whether the minister, when he makes a decision or applies his mind, whether we would inform the committee of it.
Oh, I see. When the minister concludes, he should be able to send a formal confirmation to the committee.
That's with regard to the 4 members of the NLC board who has laid a complaint in that regard, Chair. If he, whether he wants to, the minister indicated earlier that he will seek guidance on whether he can make those names available, and Mr. Cuthbert was just asking after he sought guidance whether he would do so, Chair.
Okay. Minister, if ever we can be able to get maybe a written response to that on how you actually suggest should be dealt with. But for now, I think because I've closed the meeting, we will actually on the comment Cuthbert you raising, get the minister to actually help respond. Can we conclude our meeting? We have concluded, obviously. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.